afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. As always, on the fourth Wednesday of the month, I'm joined by Mark LaBarr, conservation biologist for Audubon, Vermont. Great to see you.
Always great to be here.
So we're going to be catching up with some viewer mail.
We are, and we've got all these letters, and hopefully I have everything organized correctly.
Okay.
We try to get as many, I try to answer as many of the viewer letters as I can on TV. Sometimes I email. Sometimes I found one the other day that was stuck between the cracks, and it was a couple months old, and I had to give the person a call back. So I do my best, and we'll see what we can get through here today.
All right, who's up first?
The first one is from Shirley Parise, and she had written that her awesome grandson took this picture for me. What kind of bird is it? This is a great crested flycatcher. It's a great bird. It's a flycatcher, so it's in the same family as, say, phoebes and things like that. Oftentimes you don't see this bird. What you do hear is this weep, weep, weep. It just makes this weeping noise. And it's a cavity nester, so it nests in trees or martin houses or sometimes bluebird boxes. But that was a good one. It was a great pick, so I was able to ID that for her, and I emailed that back to her. So a great bird.
And another ID question from David Anderson.
Okay.
What bird is this?
This is, that one, this was interesting when it came over. I was like, it doesn't look like any of the ducks that I normally come across. And in fact, it wasn't. This is a domesticated duck. So it's some kind of, or domesticated mallard, some kind of cross mix jumble that those mallards do. And so it was, it falls in that, that kind of hybrid category.
Okay, here's one from David Trono, who's got some great pictures to go along with it. I enjoy watching your show every month on Across the Fence. This year I haven't seen as many different species of birds on the land surrounding my house as in past years, but I always get lots of chestnut-sided warblers and have many photos of them.
Yeah, he does.
Wow.
Dave has sent me a couple of great photos. This is just his recent batch. Chestnut-sided warbler, please, please, please to meet you. That's the song, and this is a bird that likes early successional young forest habitat. So you see it as, you've got trees kind of growing in.
Some scrub. Some
scrub. This is a great male. You can see sitting there, he's got the chestnut flanks, which is always a good indicator, and that nice yellow top. And even better is this next shot that he got, which is of the female. And you can see the chestnut on her side is not quite as pronounced as the male, but she's sitting there with a youngster. And this is a bird that probably is just out of the nest. And so it doesn't have any of the coloration that you would see in the parents, but great shots from Dave.
Beautiful shots.
And I think the next I have up, and this is, I'm just throwing this out there, up on the lake, Zach Coda Weaver was there with me, and he brings his camera and he got these great shots of common terns. This is just two that we're kind of duking it out near one of our buoys. And what's interesting with this one is one of those birds has a band. The one that's not on the buoy has a band on its leg. I would love to know where that band came from. But I forgot to mention when I did the terns last week, or last month rather, the Tern Project is funded through the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department. That's how Audubon gets its funding. So I got to give them a plug for keeping things going with that work.
All right, we've got a letter and pictures from Jan Kelly in Rutland. Hi, Mark. I live in Rutland's northeast section, and I took these photos today of what I think, after browsing one of my backyard birding books, is a northern flicker. I'm hoping also that you'll be able to confirm that the bird is a northern flicker. If not, what is it? Also, how common are the sightings?
So it is a northern flicker. She had it spot on. Northern flickers, they're pretty common birds. They're one of the few woodpeckers that feed on the ground like that. Pileateds will also feed on the ground. And they're down, doing this. Most of the other woodpeckers are up in the trees. You can always tell the northern flicker, usually when it's flying away, has a big white rump patch.
Right.
And it does have the mustaches. And I know we've talked about flickers before because Will Michael, the producer of the show, says they do have this very tropical, kind of strange, long song that you hear out in the woods oftentimes. And so, they're common, but they are declining. They're a species that is slowly declining. Folks don't quite know why, but she got that one right.
Okay, here's a question from Roy and Sandy. We have many yellow finches the year round in spring and summer. The males are beautiful. Right now they're very drab. Does nature shine them up so they look good for females during breeding season, or is there another answer?
So this is a picture of an oriole. This is what they're talking about. Actually, is the goldfinch, which actually the male molts into its plumage in the springtime, and so in the wintertime they have that brown kind of not so glamorous look, and then in the when spring comes along, they molt into that plumage, that bright yellow, and the black wings, and then even further as the summer progresses, the tips of the wings, they usually have some white markings on them, will actually erode away, so the wings actually become even darker than that.
So does that coincide with breeding season then?
Yeah, they're a late breeder. They're in action right now, those, and things like cedar waxwings breed a little bit later than some of the other birds, so yeah, the timing all works well for them. Now, we had a picture of an oriole up there, and I think that one is from Roy and Sandy. And that's for me. I got this one right here. So this guy showed up for a brief minute at my feeder, then flew off. No one seems to know for sure what he is. I'm up on the lake near Burton Island. Thank you. See, now this is from Jamie F. So I'm getting everything confused today.
That's okay. We just heard from Roy and Sandy. So
we did hear from Roy and Sandy. Okay. It's funny because when I do these letters, I have piles of things, and it's great that people call in and give us all this stuff. But it gets I can answer the bird questions, but sometimes I get things confused. So anyway, that picture is of a young oriole. Okay. And so you can tell that by the long, narrow bill. It is not looking like the adults. This is maybe a first-year bird. It's got a little black in the head. It may turn out to be a male down the line, but the male has that classic orange look to it. The female a little bit duller. But this is probably a youngster. Not a juvenile, but somebody around for the first year and just visiting the feeders to see what they can come up with.
All right, so we've got now something from the Wakefields?
We do. The Wakefields down in East Middlebury. Okay, this is a first for us for our bird feeders. The Towhee showed up one morning and fed on the ground for about 3 hours before moving on. This is from Dayton and Sarah Wakefield down in East Middlebury. And this is an eastern towhee. It used to be called a rufous-sided towhee because of those brown side, but this is the new name for it. And the western version is called the spotted towhee. Okay. And towhees have that kind of classic, they do a call, which is towhee, where they get their name, but they also do the drink your tea song. So towhees will often be, you'll hear them going, drink your tea, or some variation of that. But a great bird, one of the birds that we work with in the Champlain Valley because the population species are declining. They like that shrubby, old field, young forest kind of habitat, and that's slowly declining. So we work to keep those birds around.
Okay, here's a letter from Wayne and Janet Kimball. It says, we love watching Across the Fence, especially when the Birdman is on. I guess that's you. My question is, where are all the whippoorwills? We haven't heard them in years. We used to sit in our deck and listen to them in the summertime. What's happened to them?
That's a really good question. So whippoorwills they're the nightjars. They're in with common nighthawks. Down south you get the poorwill. And this is a great shot as to how cryptic. Yeah, this is a shot by Pam Hunt over in New Hampshire. And they nest right on the ground like that. They're very camouflaged. And they come out at night. And folks that have whippoorwills around their house these days are lucky. Their populations have really declined. A lot of these aerial insectivores that feed on insects, so nighthawks and whippoorwills and some of the other birds, their populations are going down, and people don't really know why. They suspect it could be, insecticides reducing the insect population. But if you are lucky to have one, and I say lucky because when I was down in Florida, we were at a camp and there was a poorwill out there, and all night long it flew around going poorwill, poorwill, poorwill. So you add a whip onto the front of that, and you get the whippoorwill call, and it can be rather repetitive, to say the least. But I think this is an interesting one because that. Probably, the folks that probably wrote that 30, 40 years ago, they were a real common bird here in Vermont. There were much more open field landscapes where they like to feed. And, as things start to change, a lot of these birds that people associate with Vermont, your bobolinks, your meadowlarks, your grassland birds are slowly declining just because our habitat changes and all sorts of stuff going on. All right, so is the next one for me?
It is.
I think it is. Okay, this is from Steve Cisco down in South Stratford, or he was at least walking around South Stratford. He says, "Hi, my name is Steve. Recently wandering around the South Stratford area, I came upon this nest. Went to Google Images to research eagle nest, but could only find nests in trees. Is this an eagle nest? If so, can you tell me what kind?" And this is interesting. So this is a picture. Eagles do nest in trees. You don't often, I've never seen one that doesn't nest in a tree. My guess as far as this nest is concerned is it's probably a raven nest. Ravens like to nest very similar to like peregrine falcons in these kind of remote cliff sites. You know, they're big birds. You were talking to me, asking me questions between, you know, the difference between ravens and crows. You know, they've got that wedge-shaped tail that kind of, you know, separates them from the crows.
And they're big.
And they're big. They have, you know, their bill has more feathers up on the...
They make crazy noises,
and they make crazy noises. And they're extremely intelligent. Usually you find them in more, hillier situations, but you can find them all over Vermont, and they're a great bird. Bernd Heinrich, who lives just up the road from us, wrote a book called Ravens in Winter, which talks about his experiences with ravens in the Maine, up in Maine. And that's a great read for people that happen to be Ravens fans.
Well, our last letter is from Mary Roy in Belvedere. She reads, "We live in Belvedere, Vermont. We moved here 10 years ago. We put out bird feeders right away, and every year we've had tree sparrows nesting in 2 of them. This year I was cleaning them out in April, and I found an empty nest in one, but the other had nests containing partially hatched eggs. Do you have any idea why this happened?"
You know, the only thing I can think of is house sparrows, you know, or English sparrows. They are known to get into nest boxes, and they will, you know, down at the center we found them where I've actually found dead tree swallows in the nest. So they'll come in and they'll actually kill the adult, in that case the swallow, or wreck their eggs. The only other only other bird that it could be that I would think of would potentially be a house wren. They're also known to be very territorial.
They're tiny, but they're feisty.
They are feisty, and they will get in and they will sometimes poke at eggs and do some damage to nests of other birds that are in there. So that would be my guess.
So it wasn't necessarily the birds were abandoning the nest, that something happened?
That would be my guess. I mean, sometimes it does happen. My coworker Margaret Fowle had a bluebird nest which had fledglings in it, or close to fledglings, and that nest was abandoned and those fledglings died. And you know why that happened, it's tough to say. One of the birds could have died, and so the partner just abandoned. So sometimes that happens, but oftentimes it's other birds kind of disrupting things.
Now you had another picture that you wanted to show us.
I do. I have one last picture here. This is from Dan Crapeau up at, and he took this picture of this great blue heron, and it's basically sunning itself, you know, which is kind of interesting. You know, it's standing, it looks like on a beaver lodge or something on the bank, and it's stretching out its wings, and so just kind of an interesting little goofy picture of, you know, what.
I know usually they're very formal standing.
They do. They stand very erect and tall, or they're down fishing and stuff like that. So that one's just kind of relaxed and taking a break.
We have about a minute left. What else have you been up to?
Well, we've been running the nets down at the banding station. So one cool catch that we had was a veery. And you can see this bird has a band on it. This was a veery that I banded back in 2010.
Wow.
So a bird
That's good news.
So it was a bird that showed up. And then we had this guy in one of our nets. I can't say as we had him in our nets because he wasn't really tangled up, and this is a ruffed grouse. So this is the first time ever that I caught a grouse, and it took all my thing to get a picture of that while I was holding that bird.
I was going to say, it's a handful.
Yes, it is. And normally all I find when grouse hit the nets is a large hole. So I was able to see this one up close, though. That was nice.
All right, we'd like to tell our viewers, if you have a bird-related question, you can pass it along to Mark. You can write to him at the Audubon, Vermont, 255 Sherman Hollow Road in Huntington. The zip code is 05462. You can also email Mark with a question. His email address is mlabarr@audubon.org. Send Mark your questions, and he'll try to find the answers for you on an upcoming edition of Bird Notes. Thanks for bringing in the pictures and the questions.
No problem.
And thanks to all of you for sending them in to us.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, keep them coming.
Yeah, that's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.